And indeed, Donald Trump, he's not a deal maker. He is a predator.
Wow, Trump's ambassador to Canada just leaked some information. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today we know what the deal is supposed to be between Canada and America, and why it's not happening. We now know exactly what Donald Trump wants and what Mark Carney is willing to give up for it. Let's jump into this. Starting off this episode, we got Pete Hoekstra here, Donald Trump's ambassador to Canada. He's getting annoyed dealing with Canada. Donald Trump is getting annoyed dealing with Canada. And now we know what the deal is.
And the answer was, oh yeah, absolutely. You know, we've ironed out most of the major issues, most of the major hurdles. We maybe have a little bit of work to do on, getting to an agreement or an acceptance of all of the numbers that are out there. But yeah, there are no significant hurdles out there. We have stopped negotiations with Canada. Okay. I don't say any way that there will be an agreement before Thanksgiving. I'm not sure what it's going to take to get people back to the table in a constructive and positive mood.
This says a lot because obviously what Doug Ford did and now David Eby is going to be doing too, running an ad against America and Donald Trump. This has pissed off Donald Trump to a personal level. He's taking this personally. He's vengeful and he's taking it out on Canada. I mentioned this before. We should be trying to work within the confines that we have to get a deal. We should be rolling out a grand deal. They should play nicely with America, with the big dog. We shouldn't be like the annoying yappy dog that's barking at the big dog, trying to piss it off. This isn't going to work. Clearly, it's not.
We had over 1 billion impressions. We achieved our goal, and our goal is to make sure that we get a fair deal, not a one-sided Donald Trump deal, but a fair deal for the people of Ontario and Canada. Ontario won't be fine if we sign a lousy deal. I'd rather have no deal than a terrible deal that will cost jobs here in Ontario. Do you know why President Trump's so upset right now? Because it was effective. It was working. It woke up the whole country.
I mean, what really worked here is Donald Trump magnified the ad so everyone wanted to see it. If he didn't mention it, it's the Streisand effect. It would have gotten much less attention. And Doug Ford, David Eby, the two guys doing this stuff, spoiler alert, they're not involved in this deal that Carney was going to sign with Trump.
Doug Ford digging in after U.S. President Donald Trump ended trade talks and threatened fresh tariffs. Trump claims it's all over an ad the premier aired across U.S. networks that used video of Ronald Reagan arguing against protectionism. Now, Trump's representative in Canada is saying we've missed our shot at a deal anytime soon.
There's just a lot of stuff going on, and if we don't get it by then, by Thanksgiving, it may not happen until the first of the year. So they were confident it would happen before Thanksgiving, that we would have a deal on steel, aluminum, energy, which would include both oil and uranium.
Got it there? Steel, aluminum, uranium, and oil. That was the deal. So the auto industry and the forestry industry, they're all abandoned by Mark Carney. With this information, we can start looking around and figuring out exactly what Trump wants, what the Americans want, most notably with uranium and oil. Obviously, they wanted the Keystone. That was put back on the table. They probably suggested that. Uranium, they need that for their nuclear industry, as well as these small modular, and that's not small modular reactors like we're building here in Canada, like really small ones that are tiny ones for just compounds. This is some new technology that they've got in America that they've been building, just tiny little reactors. So who knows? Is it for all of that stuff? Is it just that thing I mentioned there or whatever? But clearly that's one of the major things they want.
So that is, that's where we were on Thursday. We have stopped negotiations with Canada.
Imagine being that close to a deal and just completely losing it over that dumb ad.
It's Ambassador Pete Hoekstra. Even Hoekstra says that just last week, as you heard there, he thought a sectoral deal was in sight for steel and aluminum. So how did it all go so wrong? What is your assessment at this point of what really went wrong in this whole thing?
I mean, I think that Donald Trump was looking for a reason to withdraw America from these talks. He saw this ad a while ago. He talked about it early last week and said he would have run the same ad if he were Canada. And then Thursday night comes, he gets on Truth Social and starts tweeting maniacal things about how he's abandoning the talks because the ad is allegedly false. It's not. It quotes Ronald Reagan accurately. Ronald Reagan opposed tariffs. The reason we have a free trade agreement with the United States in the first place is because President Reagan and Prime Minister Brian Mulroney signed one in 1988. So
the problem is not Ronald Reagan's words. It's the fact that it omitted other words, which put everything in context, and they reordered it to strengthen those words, making him look like a anti-tariff absolutist. These guys know this. Why don't they just say it as it actually is?
The idea that these talks were totally derailed by a 60-second commercial that the Ontario government has been airing in the United States for the past 2 weeks seems improbable, Vashi. If the talks were going so swimmingly, they wouldn't be derailed by a pretty tame ad, all things considered. All it does is quote Ronald Reagan from a 1987 speech talking about how tariffs and protectionism can cost jobs in the United States and how it's not the way to go.
Donald Trump took it as a personal attack. Have these guys not figured out exactly who Donald Trump is? He takes things personally. That's why you shouldn't be doing stuff like that when we're trying to get a deal.
It's interesting, Tom, because on the one hand, you have the Premier of Ontario kind of defending the intent behind the ad and also indicating that the Prime Minister saw it before it went to air, the Prime Minister and his Chief of Staff. On the other, you have the Prime Minister, not in so many words, but certainly in the scrum with reporters from Malaysia today, basically saying take Trump at his word. He says it was about the ad, so it's about the ad. What does that kind of schism show you?
It shows that there's a real issue starting to brew between Prime Minister Carney and, of course, Premier Ford. And I'm keeping an eye on it because in addition to what you just mentioned, I'd point out that Prime Minister Carney went so far as to say that it was clear that he would never have considered putting up an ad like that. And there was an admonition in that. He was finger pointing a little bit softly at Ford. And then there was the second part where he added, well, actually, the people who are around the table, the people who are in the negotiating room, they know what's going on. Parenthesis. And Doug Ford doesn't know what's going on because he's not part of those negotiations.
And if you saw my previous video, Doug Ford blamed Mark Carney during his press conference saying, oh, he knew about the ad, they approved it. They're both throwing each other under the bus. They're both snakes. Exactly what I said before. They're both snakes. Doug Ford wants to take Pierre Poilievre's job. He thinks he can be prime minister. Mark Carney's a snake. He just used Doug Ford. And now that he's done with Doug Ford, he's chucking him aside.
It's warming up. the duel between Ford and Carney. I hope it doesn't go any further because, goodness sake, Canada needs both of them on the same side and going in the same direction. But it's the bit where Ford affirms. It's a strong affirmation. He affirms that Carney saw it. I'm not sure he knows that much about the Prime Minister's agenda that he can make that affirmation, unless he's got an email from Mr. Carney saying, oh, no, I've seen it. And his Chief of Staff, I'd be very surprised that he actually took the time to look at something like that. So I'm not sure where this is supposed to go right now, but I do think I'm very much on the same page as Rob. I think that this is just another excuse by a very experienced grifter named Donald Trump, who's breaking the card table because he doesn't like the hand that he has. He was going to have a deal with Canada, then he's not going to have a deal. And yeah, he really didn't like having Ronald Reagan served up in his face. And there was nothing wrong with Ford's ad on that level. I took the trouble, like I'm sure a lot of other people, to listen to all 5 minutes of Reagan's speech back in '87. There was nothing in what Ontario put out that changed in any way, shape, or form what was in there. Ronald Reagan was saying tariffs are bad long term. Donald Trump doesn't do long term. He does short term. It's like, what can I get for myself now? What can today take? And let tomorrow take care of itself. That's Donald Trump. And that's...
Yeah, but they changed the narrative of what he was saying there. They removed the entire section about him talking about Japanese tariffs that they were implementing on Japan, 100% tariffs on vehicles. Just removed all of it. Taking that away changes the meaning of his speech. These guys know this. Can they just be honest on here for a minute? This is not about taking Trump's side or taking Doug Ford's side. It's just looking at the honest truth. They manipulated the ad to get a result. They got the result. They got called out on it. Donald Trump got pissed off because he's taking it as a personal attack. Canadians pay the price. That's what's happening. And his comment about grifter. We want to talk about a grifter. We quite literally have a globalist banker as a prime minister who's trying to canoodle a way of making himself and his buddies rich in the process of tanking Canada. Mark Carney and his agenda here, all this green eco net zero stuff, G-Fans, the whole company he made for this, is a grift, and he knows it. Mr. Banker here is a smart man. He knows that oil and gas is what builds powerful, rich countries. He knows this, and I have proof of it. Look at this clip here of Mark Carney back when he had black hair. This is when you can see here Mark Carney, governor of the Bank of Canada. Listen to what he had to say about pipelines back then. This would have been back between 2008 and 2013.
So this is, and we've highlighted this issue again in this report, as you would have seen. This is ultimately an issue of pipeline and refining capacity. It is not our view. It is not our view that this is an issue of deficient U.S. demand. We see the possibility of American, quote, energy security in a few decades, but that's in a North American context. That includes a substantial increase in exports of Canadian crude to the U.S. market. Obviously, there is an advantage to having as many options as
many
politically-
customers.
as many customers as possible, and multiple options from an infrastructure perspective that can be supported by the.
So if I can summarize, what you're suggesting is the only thing we can do, and the best thing, if we use your 2020 vision, as you suggested to Mr. Bryson, is to concentrate on pipeline capacity and refining capacity. Is that fair to say?
This is an infrastructure issue, yes.
And those two pieces.
Those are the two main pieces, yes.
There it is. So Mark Carney, under his own advice, is we should be building more pipelines and diversifying our clients. And there's not a deficient U.S. demand, straight from his own words here. And yet, what is he running now? What is he pushing? Everything needs to be climate competitive. Everything needs to have carbon credits, a system that he's invested in on the ground level. He's going against his own words here because it's a money-making scheme. Look at this chart here that Kirk posted. This is from British Columbia, but this gives a general indication across Canada of the most productive industries. And as he points out, the oil and gas industry generates $1,064 per hour worked to the economy. Look how much value the oil and gas sector offers over everything else. That's why I keep saying this. Even the forestry industry, which you can see right here, 57, and even mining, 120. I keep saying it. Oil and gas pays the bills in every country. If you don't have it, it's likely your country is poor. If you do have it, then your country can be stinking rich. Unfortunately, in our country, we have a bunch of eco-climate zealots who don't understand how the world works. It's far better for the economy than anything else. That's why it's so preposterous that David Eby keeps pushing back against this. It's ridiculous. So when you want to talk about grifter, how about we talk about that? You know, they can attack Donald Trump all they want on here, but they should equally be attacking Mark Carney for his own words, his own change in stance, which clearly is going to make himself rich, or is already making himself rich.
Do you think, Lisa, that, I mean, I don't know how we know for sure, but do you have an instinct as to whether this is about irritants like the ad, like the Stellantis and GM remission changes, or whether it's a negotiating tactic that Trump has been known to use in negotiations before, just kind of like a last minute exit until he's ready to come back?
I think your last clip from Ambassador Hoekstra told us everything we need to know. There was a deal on the table. Canadians did not accept it. Mr. Trump did not like that. And he warned Canadians that if you didn't take the deal as presented, you would go back to the end of the line of 94 other countries who are trying to do deals with the United States right now. And he went through with his word. I think the Prime Minister is fortunate that Doug Ford has been seized upon to be the excuse for why Mr. Trump did this, but he didn't cause it at all. What I would like to hear from the Prime Minister is, well, what was in the deal? What was in the deal that you rejected? Why did you reject it? What's our plan going forward? How much is it going to cost us in the short term? How much is it going to cost us in the long term? I can't really fault Premier Eby or Premier Ford for fighting, because there are two really big things not included in that deal: autos and forestry. So where are those? I mean, I was really hoping that speech last Tuesday was going to lay out some of these things. We had been hearing about the rumor of a deal being imminent for many, many, many days. The Americans were talking about it, and we didn't sign off. Why? I'm sure it's good reasons, but we deserve an explanation.
This take is so on point. She said what I always point out on the channel here. What's in this deal? What exactly is going on? At this point, it needs to be transparent why this deal fell through, why Mark Carney failed Canadians again. Ford must resign. Yeah, he should. Carney knew about the ad. Yep. Canada is collapsing after 11 years of liberalism. Moving over to CBC, listen to this take from David Frum. He's a Canadian-American political commentator, author, former speechwriter for U.S. President George W. Bush. Little spoiler alert here. As for having the media staying out of this and just letting the leaders negotiate, that's not going to happen here. CBC is throwing right hooks, or they're bringing on people to throw right hooks.
Understanding the sort of philosophical approach to negotiations and the art of the deal, or whatever it is with Donald Trump, is really important for all of the world leaders trying to figure out how to navigate this moment. Carney has decided to say, hey, we're here. We'll talk whenever you're ready. We're whenever you want, we'll sit back down and talk. Is that the right approach? I mean, it does feel like they could still bump into each other in the back hallway of the APEC summit and work something out.
I think that is one of the silliest things that people say about Donald Trump is they say, have you read The Art of the Deal? You should read The Art of the Deal to understand Donald Trump. So really, you've read The Art of the Deal? He hasn't. The man who wrote the book has made clear Donald Trump never read the book. And indeed, Donald Trump, he's not a deal maker. He is a predator. Deal makers understand that to complete a transaction in a market economy, both parties have to agree that they're better off, or else the transaction won't happen. Donald Trump's view of all transactions, not just trade, But all economic transaction is somebody wins and somebody loses. That's why he was famous, for example, for never paying his subcontractors when he did real estate projects.
Okay, well, stop it there for a second, because this guy's taking a bunch of swings. As for his claim about the art of the deal, he is correct here, at least mostly correct. Trump's ghostwriter says the art of the deal is the greatest regret of his life. Ouch. He says, I knew this guy was a bad guy when I did the book. Tony Schwartz, that's the ghostwriter for Art of the Deal. He says Trump is not only willing to lie, but he doesn't get bothered by it. So he goes on here to just bash on Trump a whole bunch, and then basically mentions that he got paid $250,000 up front to write The Art of the Deal, and he gets 50% of the profits, and he says it's blood money. He's donated some of it to charity. He basically says that Donald Trump didn't read the manuscript, nor did he have any input into it. Donald Trump says he edited pieces. He's read sections of it. Who knows? This is his word versus his word. What I'm more interested in is clearly Donald Trump didn't write it because he had a ghostwriter, but did Donald Trump sit down with him and say, hey, this is how I negotiate. I do this, I do that. This is the result, yada, yada, yada. He took notes and then wrote a book? Or was it just, hey, Tony, go write a book about negotiating, and had no input into it, and it had nothing to do with how Trump negotiates? That's the difference I want to know. As for Tony Schwartz, how good is this for his career to come out and blast Donald Trump after he ghost wrote that? You got to imagine that's got to be pretty awful for bringing in new clients. But moving on to the next accusation here, Donald Trump not paying contractors. I've seen a few YouTube videos and short form videos in the past about this. There's numerous different stories. I don't know if any of these are verified or true, or what's the deal. There seems to be a bunch of them, so it's most likely this has happened. This one says there's at least 60 lawsuits with hundreds of liens, judgments, and other government filings document people have accused Trump of his business failing to pay for their work. We've got this one, Washington, D.C. contractor stiffed by Trump. And we've got a website here that lists out a bunch of them. His personal driver, a Philadelphia cabinet maker, a paint seller, drapery business in Las Vegas. What we do know is there seems to be at least some court cases where Trump's lawyers ended up paying out these people to not go to court. This most likely did happen multiple times. I don't know why he'd operate business like that, but that just brings me back to what I said in the previous video. Pierre Poilievre is nothing like Donald Trump. If anything, Mark Carney is closer to Donald Trump. They're both globalist guys with elite networks, a lot of money, high net value, big networks, a lot of connections. Pierre Poilievre is a man of the people. Pierre Poilievre doesn't have this kind of reputation, doesn't have ghostwriters, doesn't have any of this stuff. Canadians would be lucky to have Pierre Poilievre as the next Prime Minister of Canada.
Now, no successful real estate developer in the world can afford a reputation as someone who consistently refuses to pay contractors, because then you won't have contractors. That's a crook. That's someone who's not a great deal maker. And I think that is a mistake that a lot of people have about him. He is a predator. He backs down. He asserts dominance when he can, and he backs down when anyone is able credibly to assert dominance against him. As his position in the country weakens over the coming year, a lot of these discussions that seem so difficult now will get easier. And Canada will do better in conversations in 2026 than it can possibly do in conversations in 2025.
Predator, that's quite the strong word. So all I have to say to this is, once again, we know Donald Trump is very bolsterous. He's very reactionary. He takes things personally, and we should work within these confines. We should get a deal and know who we're dealing with, and not do things that will piss off the guy, because real Canadians are losing their jobs, real Canadians are losing their houses, and real Canadians are sleeping in the streets and don't have enough food to eat. There are consequences to the media's actions and to our politicians' actions. Doug Ford, David Eby, and Mark Carney.